Hi everyone, it's Julie from Learn to Play. Today I'm going to show you how to create your own parent handbook. I did show this handbook briefly in my last video on my parent information packet and everything that I give them. I had a couple of people comment that yes, they would like to see a video on how to create their own parent handbook. I cannot stress enough how important having a parent handbook is, because it takes away any confusion, any misunderstandings, especially if you go over this handbook at the time of enrollment. I wouldn't suggest that you simply just hand this to the parents and tell them to sign it and bring it back. Definitely highlight the areas, if anything, that you know that could come up in question. I mean, you don't have to read the whole thing, front to back with them, although they definitely should. But I would definitely, anything that's the utmost importance to you, I would definitely go over that with them in this handbook. So what I have done is I went back and I kind of just, I took out all of this stuff because this is the kind of stuff that we'll go over. And I'll give you some hints, some little, suggestions on what to put in certain areas. Okay, the first thing I want to go over is just the basic cover of it. Definitely put the year or years that this handbook will pertain to. Since I am opening the second half of the year, I am going to make this relevant for 2024 and 2025. I did put my logo in the middle. Now, if you don't have a logo for your business, you can simply use any kind of clip art. I want to say I did this cover off of Canva, but my first home daycare, I did simply just put clip art on the parent handbook. I'll insert a picture here so you can see again. So if you don't have a logo, but I would definitely have something here. I would definitely have the name of your daycare on here somewhere. Mine, I have my address on the front cover as well. You could put your website on here. You could put your email on here, your phone number, or any kind of contact information. But just keep it simple, guys. I mean, this is just the front cover. Okay, here is the first page of my current handbook. First thing that I address is admissions and enrollment. I talk about the ages that I serve and whether or not I offer full or part-time care. You could put that in this section. I do have a little disclaimer that no child will be denied admission based on race, religion, or handicap. Now that is up to you if you prefer to take children with special needs or a handicapped child. Maybe you live in an apartment building and you're on the second floor or whatnot and there's no way to get a wheelchair up there. Well then, you would disclaim that you're not being biased, you're not able to accommodate them. I also add in this section that I retain the right to deny any admission if my slots for a particular child's age group are filled or I do not see the child as a good fit. I definitely would add something in there for that, just because that saves you, like if you have a trial basis, you can say, well, in the handbook, I do mention that I reserve the rights to deny admission if I feel like they're not, a good fit or whatnot. The deposit is next. I require a 2-week deposit that goes towards the last 2 weeks of care. Now you could do, if you charge monthly, you could charge a 1-month deposit. At the center, I only charge a 1-week deposit, and then I have like an enrollment fee on top of that. Here, I'm going to charge a 2-week deposit and the enrollment fee as well. Again, that just saves you that if they skip out, then, you at least gotten paid. I do mention that your child's spot is not secured until I've received both the enrollment fee and the deposit and the parent-provider contract enrollment application. I also mention that the deposit will be credited towards the last 2 weeks of your child care, given that a 2 weeks notice of departure was given. And then if they want to pay by check or whatnot, I just, have checks payable too. Next up is the adjustment trial period. I put that there will be a trial period for 30 days. Either party may terminate services during this time without penalty. So again, most likely if childcare is to be terminated, it's going to be on the provider's end. Very few times have I seen it where, and I don't think I've personally ever seen it, where within 30 days the family is like, no, this isn't a good fit. Termination. I do require a 2 weeks notice for withdrawal from daycare. The initial 2 weeks deposit will be credited towards that tuition payment for the final 2 weeks. I also have a disclaimer that if I ever find it necessary to end our agreement, I will also give the parents at least 2 weeks written notice. There is an exception to this rule though. If they are destructive, they're uncontrollable, they have violent behaviors, parents are, constantly picking up late, if they're constantly paying late, then I do not have to give them 2 weeks notice. Termination could be on the spot, like an immediate termination. I also put a disclaimer: if it becomes necessary for me to resort to legal action to collect fees, that the parents will be responsible for any legal fees that occur by the daycare. Hours of operation, pretty self-explanatory. You put, Monday through Friday, Sunday through Saturday, whatever hours you're open. Now this does change, and my only suggestion that if you do change the hours, you can simply come and do an amendment and then just have the parents sign it. Say you're originally 6:30 to 6, and then you're noticing that you don't have children until like 7:15, 7:30, so you want to change your hours to 7:15 to 5:30. Obviously, for future families, they would have an updated handbook. For any families that had signed the original handbook, say, with your original hours, 6:30 to 6, I would just, again, amend it and then have the parents sign off on it. Tuition, I simply put that tuition is based on the number of days of attendance. Again, it's up to you how you want to do tuition. In this section right here, you could put, tuition is due on Fridays, tuition is due on Mondays. And then you could also, if you have a separate tuition sheet that you're going to hand the parents, you could put see attachment, or you could simply put your tuition rates in this section right here. Payment schedule, I have a no pay, no play policy. So I do have my parents pay in advance. I do that at the center, and I've always done that at the home daycare. They pay on Fridays for the following week. If they do not pay on Fridays, the child cannot come for care on Monday until the payment has been received. I also talk about the ways that I accept payment. Now, since I am going to ProCare, I'm going to have the families pay on there. Sometimes at the home daycare, I did have families pay me through Venmo or cash, and that's fine. I just give them a receipt. And then if they were to write a check and if it was to bounce, I do put that I have a $30 late or a $30 non-sufficient fund fee for any return checks. Arrivals and departures. I talk about what time does my program open. I please ask them not to drop off prior to opening without prior consent. I also ask for them to always notify me if there would be someone else picking up for the day, because then I would ask for a license, and that's where that authorization form comes in. You could see like, oh, Grandma Betty's coming to pick up. I see that she's on the authorization form. This is her full name. The first time she picks up, I have her give me a license, picture ID, especially if the child was like, I don't know who this is. And sometimes kids could just be little stinkers and do that, but always ask for a photo ID. I also ask them to be courteous and arrive on time, that after hours is time with my family. The next section is religious and national holidays. Here is where I put all the holidays and stuff that I am closed. I do not talk about my vacation here. I simply just put the holidays that I will be closed. I also have a disclaimer: if the holiday falls on a Saturday, the daycare will be closed the Friday before. If a holiday falls on a Sunday, the daycare will be closed the Monday after. Sick and personal days. Now, this is up to you whether or not you are asking to be paid for your sick and personal days. I personally take off 3 days a year for sick/personal days. Those can be used for doing continuing education. It could be because I'm truly sick. I always try to give my families as much notice as possible, and I do let them know that they are still required in my program to pay for those personal days. Vacations. Here is where I talk about my vacation schedule for each calendar year. I am closed 2 weeks a year for my vacation. That is a paid 2 weeks. The reason why, this is a business, and everyone, I'm not going to say everyone, most people at a job, they are getting paid vacation. So why should we be any different? Stick to your guns, you guys. So I do have my parents pay me for my vacations, and then I give them at least a minimum of 30 days notice. Now, since I am opening up in September, I'm going to take a little bit of vacation around Christmas time. I'm not asking them to pay for that because it is my first year, but after my first year, I will have them pay for my vacation. Parents' vacation. Again, this is where you decide, are you going to give them a discount? Are they still required to pay? I did a lot of research in my area and the other programs and what they have offered. I do ask that the parents give me at least 2 weeks notice that the child is going to be absent on vacation, so that this helps me adjust my schedule if need be. I am going to require that they still pay for their vacation, to remind them that they're paying for your child's space in my program and not per attendance. Now at the center, I do give my families after 6 months 1 week at half off. I did do that, I believe, at the home daycare as well. Again, I did my research in this area, and it seems that most providers requiring that tuition is still paid by the parents, and so I am going to follow suit. Open door policy. I maintain an open door policy. Parents are welcome to visit the daycare anytime during business hours. The only thing that I ask, they do not stop in during nap time because it is disruptive. I also remind them that when visitors are here, that children behave in an excited manner. That usually does not occur when I'm alone with them. Also, your child may become upset when your visit is over and you leave without them. So that is something to also remind the parents. I did forget, I have another area in my handbook for attendance, and this is where I simply put, it must be understood to hold your child's space. Payment, it must be paid whether your child attends or not. Payment is based on contract, not attendance. So that is a good disclaimer to have in there. The next area is behavior management and discipline. The discipline is achieved through patience, consistency, and positive reinforcement is what I tell my parents. I also teach children in my care. I teach them manners, I teach them kindness, and I teach them to be respectful to others. One of the ways that I do this is by example that I set as a provider. The children are explained the rules of the daycare frequently. You may have to be like, we're not on the couch, we're not standing on tables, that is one of our rules. And so you definitely, especially at the beginning with any new child or a new program, you have to go over those rules multiple times a day probably. If a child is not old enough to understand the rules and disobeys them by, exhibiting inappropriate behavior such as hitting, biting, hurting others or property, the following developmental appropriate guideline techniques will be used. So I have a positive reinforcement. The child will be encouraged when he or she is demonstrating acceptable behavior. Redirection, simply just, removing the child from one activity, placing them into a second activity, giving them the opportunity possibly to go back to this area that they were having trouble in after they have calmed down. Time out. A child is separated from the group for an age-appropriate amount of time. 1 minute per 1 year of age is what I have found. When the child shows that he or she is ready to demonstrate acceptable behavior, they are encouraged to join the rest of the group and try again. And then the last resort. When a child's behavior is continually upsetting or dangerous to others, a conference will be called with the parent. If their problems cannot be resolved, arrangements will be made for the child to find care elsewhere. So that's definitely, a last resort. We need to make sure that both parents and, the provider are on the same page, especially with behavioral management. Some of the examples would be during drop-off and pickup times. The child is going to test both of you. As the provider, they're going to test me. As their parent, they're going to test me. I see this all the time at the center. They're clingy. They're throwing toys. They're running around. They don't want to listen, especially at pickup. I have kids that try to run through the building. And, you have to stand firm. Like, no, we're not running through the building, or this is the area that we stay in. Would be amazed that parents sometimes, they just are oblivious to what's going on. So you as a provider, it's your home. You need to set your rules. The parents, that they need to help show their child that you respect me, that you respect my rules of my house and my property, by reminding them that the rules still apply when you are around. So let the parents know that. Cleanliness. I am OCD. I take, the well-being of children very seriously, and I work hard to provide an environment that is healthy, or healthy as possible. I cannot stand when I see a child with, food on their face, their clothes are dirty. Absolutely not. I'm not returning a child that way because they didn't come to me that way. Even if I don't have spare clothes, I'm finding them spare clothes. I'm washing their clothes here because why do that to the child? The child, especially if they're young, an older child, you can, hey, here's a washcloth, please clean up. But I do not believe in sending a child home dirty. And that's why I always try to make sure that I have a whole bunch of extra spare clothes here as well in case the parents forget. Diaper policy. My policy is I'm supplying diapers, wipes, and the diaper creams. That is probably not most people's policy. I just find it easier. That way I'm not chasing people for diapers. I'm not chasing people for wipes. In my first home daycare, I only offered the wipes and creams. The parents brought diapers. The center, I supply everything, and I've never regretted that. So you can talk about your diaper policy. How often are you going to change them? I change them every 2 hours or more often as needed, or when they have a bowel movement, they are changed immediately. How are you going to change them? Are they going to be on a changing table? Are they going to be on a pad? You talk about in this section hand washing of the provider and the child after each diaper change. And then what are you going to do with the soiled clothes? Are you going to wash them at your house? Are you going to send them home? If you are going to send them home, Amazon has great disposable diaper bags. They're purple, I believe. I'll insert a clip here. And those are the perfect size to put clothes in that need to go home because you don't have to wash them. That's going to be okay. Next up, we're going to talk about toilet training. Now, I encourage potty training usually when the child's, ready, which is about 2 to 3 years old. Some of them start younger. My youngest daughter was potty trained at 18 months old. But I have seen children at the center who have not potty trained and they're like 4 years old. I just request that the initial start needs to be done at home and for at least 2 weeks success before they can effectively start it at the daycare. Because if I'm only doing it here at the daycare and the parents aren't doing it at home, then it's not going to work. I do request that the children come to daycare in cotton trained pants or underwear after they've been accident free for at least 2 weeks at home with pull-ups. Now I will supply the pull-ups for here because I do supply the diapers. And I also encourage the parents to dress the children in clothing that is easily removable when they're trying to potty train. I do provide a potty chair and books. I do make it, a positive situation for the children. We do have like a reward chart. But again, this has to start at home in my opinion. And so however you want to handle potty training, those are just things that I list down in here. Okay, next up is dress for play. I do ask that all children are dressed and ready for the day. The only exception is for infants under the age of 1. I do permit them to come in their pajamas because sometimes, especially when they're like 2-3 months, they might just wear pajamas all day long. I also remind the families that we do messy activities such as painting, playing outdoors, and we use some, messy items at times. I ask the parents to please don't bring your children in clothes that you don't want ruined. Again, I had mentioned before, I do their laundry here if they get dirty throughout the day, but I don't want to be responsible if you're sending your kid in a $50 sweater and it gets ruined and I'm not able to clean it. So I do ask that they wear daycare appropriate clothes. And I also ask that they dress them appropriately for the weather. So if it's summertime, don't bring them in a long sleeve shirt. If it's wintertime, don't bring them in shorts. Meals and snacks. In this section, you can talk about what do you offer? Do you supply and provide meals? Do you have the families bring them in? I do provide breakfast, lunch, and a morning snack and an afternoon snack. If you are having the families bring in their lunch or bring in their food, are they bringing in just lunches? Are they bringing in breakfast too? Are they bringing in their own milk? Are you supplying the milk? Now, there are a lot of children these days with special diets. So at the center, we have children on lactate milk. We have children on almond milk. We have, regular milk. So that would be something to consider too. Are you going to, if you are supplying all the food and the milk, are you supplying those extra kind of milks? Because some of those milks are expensive, I'm not gonna lie. I do have the parents bring in baby food and formula for the children because everyone's different. I've had parents in the past that make their own baby food and it's like an ice cubes and they just bring me a whole freezer pouch. And when it gets low, I simply tell them to stack up. I have other parents who have brought food in daily, such as baby food and stuff like that. I always post my weekly menu on the parents information board, and in ProCare I send home a weekly menu to my families as well, and so I will continue to do that here at the daycare. If they do have a special diet, whether they're vegetarian or vegan or have allergies or religious beliefs, I do ask them that the families provide those meals and snacks. Supplies needed at daycare. What I request of the parents is that I request weather appropriate clothing. I do send home a notice per season. So like I'll send home like a fall list that they should bring in, a spring list, a summer list, and a winter list. I do supply, the winter gear. I supply the rain gear. The children do need to bring a bathing suit. I do supply the towels. I also supply the toothbrush and toothpaste because we will be brushing our teeth after lunch. It's just a good habit to get into, and I'm sure that the children are doing it at home in the morning, so we will continue that at lunch. I do provide the sleeping bag and pillows for the children who will be resting on either a mat or a cot. I supply all of the bedding for our portable cribs and stuff like that. Only thing I do ask is that the parents write their names on the clothing, especially on like underwear and stuff like that, because I usually have like a lost and found bin that I'll keep some stuff in, and over time you really get to know what clothes the children come in. But to prevent any kind of mix-ups, I do ask that the parents label their clothing. Okay, the next section is nap and quiet time. You can put in here, what are your hours for nap and quiet time? I typically do between like 12:30 and 2:30, 1 to 3. I do ask to avoid disturbing the children during nap time, that they schedule their pickups either prior or after. And I do realize in some situations they have to be picked up during nap time. And if that's the case, I ask the parents to let me know in advance, then I will sleep the child away from the other children. So if they do have to get picked up, then they don't disturb the other children. And here again, you could mention, what do you supply? Are you supplying, do the children have to bring in their own bedding? If not, I also mentioned that I will follow the infant's home sleep schedule up until like 1 year of age. After 1 year, I try to incorporate them into our nap schedule for the older children. Sometimes it may be more along the lines of 18 months, but definitely by 18 months, I try to transition them to the toddler rest periods. Learning and fun. Here I talk about my curriculum. I talk about how each child is encouraged to participate in our daily preschool activities. I talk, what does the curriculum, activities, what are they based on? I talk about focusing on letters and numbers and shapes. Talk about how children practice writing their names and letter recognition. I believe in play-based learning, and that's why I offer a variety of toys, props, learning centers to influence learning. I do remind them that the child will be doing arts and crafts, and that circle time will be included in our daily routine. I like to do themes, so each week I do a different theme. I encourage their children to use their imagination and play. So that's kind of what I put down in there. TV. If I do allow television, it's obviously age-appropriate shows. Sometimes early mornings, if I have early kids, we'll have the TV on until the rest of the group gets here and we have breakfast. Or upon pickup, I will have the TV on occasionally. I do not leave it on all day. A lot of times we'll do like a movie day if it's raining outside or whatnot, but I want to make sure the parents realize that the children are never required to sit down and watch the TV. Another activity will always be provided, and that the TV is not in replace of free play or learning activities. Toys. I provide so many toys that I ask the parents, please do not bring in toys from home. If you want to bring in photos of your family, we can do that. If you could do a show and tell on Fridays if you wanted to do that, because as much as I encourage sharing, this seldom works when the child is bringing in their own personal toy, because obviously they're going to be territorial, they're young, they look at it, it's mine, I don't want anyone else playing with it, and that only causes problems between them and the other children. I never allow the families to bring in toy weapons, and I discourage the children from using everyday toys as toy weapons as well. I do let them know that I'm not going to be held responsible for any personal property that is destroyed. I do sanitize my toys daily/weekly, and toys are also inspected, for any broken pieces and immediately removed to prevent any injuries. I let the families know. The last section on this page is pets. You can list what kind of pet you have, their age. You can remind the parents that they're vaccinated. If your pets are in the house but they're not part of your daycare program, you can add that in here. I have 2 dogs, but they are in a separate area in the house. Or if they are allowed in your house. I have always allowed my pets to be part of the program. They have grown up around children, And so I'm a huge animal lover. Luckily in the past, all my families have been as well. So I've never really ran into that. Now I do have my dogs bark, upon people initially walking in. So in the mornings I do have them locked away, like in a bedroom. And then I bring them out after all the children have arrived, just because I don't want, to scare off anyone or scare the children when they first walk in. And I let them know that if they do have pet allergies, that this is not the daycare for you then, because obviously, I have animals at home. Next, I want to talk about illness. So I list in here in this section everything that the child could possibly be sent home for. If they have a fever over 100, if they have, 3 diarrheas, if they're vomiting, if they have pink eye, if they, have an asthma flare up and no medication is provided, if I find like ringworm on them, if they have strep throat, I do ask the parents, please do not bring your child in when they are sick. I will know if you gave them Tylenol at 7 a.m. because if at 10 a.m. they have a fever, then I know. I do try to isolate the children then from the other children, either if they're younger, put them in a high chair, put them at a different table, just so that it doesn't spread. I do immediately then disinfect any toys once the child leaves that they had been playing with. If the child has taken antibiotics for an illness, they can return after 24 hours of taking the antibiotic as long as there is no fever, or they are no longer contagious and they're feeling well enough to be in the program. That's a big thing, because a lot of times, the parents think they're pulling one over on you, I'm going to medicate them and this and that. And then, a couple hours later, the child is just completely lethargic and not wanting to be there. And then it's just miserable for everyone. Under the medication, list your medication policy. I would suggest that having a written consent. I have that as a requirement for any medication. If the child refuses to take medication, the parents will be notified. I will not force a child to take medication. And I encourage parents to give the medication at home whenever possible, especially eye drops and stuff like that. I am a nurse, and so I do feel confident and comfortable giving medication. Some providers may not. You may have a no medication policy at all. So that's where you would put that in this area. Medical and dental emergency procedures, you definitely want to have, this is part of your program. You want to have, how are you going to handle each one of these? If the child is injured in daycare, remind the parents that first aid will be given. And if so, what kind of treatment, are you going to give them? I always have a first aid kit outside and inside. I let the parents know that I will make every attempt to contact them first prior to calling, 911. Even if it's an emergency, calling 911, obviously I'm going to call both around the same time. I do have them sign whether or not they authorize emergency treatment. So if I do call 911, is your child allowed to go with them or not? And sometimes you might have to override that, because if they have a really serious injury and you can't get a hold of parents and they sign to know they're not to be transported, but use your judgment call. If you're like, no, this child needs to go, then stick by your intuition. It's very important that all emergency contact information is kept up to date and is correct, such as like phone numbers, their authorization, people's phone numbers if you couldn't get a hold of the parents. They're all of that contact information needs to be up to date. And a good practice with that is that each year have them look over their initial enrollment forms, and if any changes need to be made, just simply give them a new form. Under the notes section, I just let them know if it's a serious accident or sudden illness. These are the steps that I would be taking. I would call 911. I would notify the parents. A child would be separated from the other children for appropriate care, and a parent, provider, ambulance takes the child and health records to the doctor or hospital. So you would send along like your information packet with it. Okay, the last thing on this page, it talks about our evacuation procedure. So what is your evacuation procedure? Do you have a disaster plan? In our state, we are required to have one. I also have outlines of like my house, and so if it was like a tornado, we are going in this room. If we had to exit the home, we are going out this door. I talk about how are you going to transport infants? Are you going to put them in cribs? Are you going to put them in strollers? What are you going to do once you get outside? How are you going to notify the parents? What are you going to bring with your children? And then who's ultimately going to make the decision that it's safe to return? Piggybacking off the evacuation procedures, we talk about fire procedures. We do have to have smoke alarms. Obviously, in the home, I have fire extinguishers. We have to have a carbon monoxide detector in here. Your procedures, if you do discover fire and smoke, where are you going? In this area for natural disasters, you can talk about where will you go if there is a tornado. About what is your policy that if it's a natural disaster, that you would be closed, that you would open late, that you would close early. You know, what are your policy and procedures on that? Loss of power, heat. The first thing you do, obviously, you're going to contact the parents, let them know what's going on. I contact the, electric company or the gas company to see if they can give me an estimate when it would return. If this happens overnight, what is your policy going to be then for morning care? Are you going to allow the parents still to drop off? And then how much notice, are you giving to your parents? So say if you lost power at 2 a.m, are you contacting them at 2 a.m? Are you waiting until 5 a.m? I suggest the earlier you can contact if you need to close, obviously better for everyone. Next up is children with special needs. Now, this isn't just in general, this is going along the lines of the evacuation process. If you do not have any children with special needs, you don't need to probably put this in your handbook, but if you do, talk about how are you going to transport them. If they have to be removed from the house, are you going to use a crib? Are you going to use a wheelchair? How are you going to do so? Children that have medication, always have that readily available in case you do have an emergency and you have to leave the house. And just remember that, to always bring that with you. And then continuing operations after a disaster. So after it resumes, what are you going to do? Obviously the children are going to come back into the home. I put in my handbook that an appropriate conversation will take place in regards to the disaster with the children. I give them the opportunity to express their thoughts and feelings on the event that occurred. If the children are unable to return to the home daycare and are picked up by their parents, a mutual plan will be discussed on the child's care moving forward. So say, God forbid, your house burns down, clearly you're not going to be able to care for the children, or that child or whatever the next day. So just kind of having thought, in the back of your mind, how do you want to present, continuing operations after a disaster? The next section is child abuse reporting. I do remind the families that I am required by state law to report any incidents or suspected child abuse. My first concern is for the safety of the children. If I suspect, any kind of abuse, I will file a report to the proper authorities. Staff required licensing, records, and trainings. And here I just simply list that every staff member has a background check, that every staff member has a valid CPR, first aid, child abuse, any kind of infectious disease thing. I list everything that is the requirements of the staff. That they have a negative TB test, that we do 10 hours annually of child care trainings, that we get a yearly physical, just to kind of put the parents at ease. The required household member records area, this may not pertain to you. In Michigan, every family member or anyone that lives in the house is required to do a background check, and they're also required to have a negative TB test. So if your state, this is not a requirement, again, you could omit that. Child required records. This could be state specific, or it could be just your policies. In Michigan, each child is, they have to have like an in-care statement. They have these little child care information forms that they have to have on file. We have to have written permission to give out medication. We have to have written permission for water activities. So if you saw my last video on that parent information pack, that really goes over all the forms that I have to have. This is a topic that I would go over with the parents specifically in this handbook, just so that they know everything that is required of them. And this is where that parent information packet really comes into play. ProCare, again, I'm sure most people are not doing ProCare. A lot of people do Brightwheel. People do neither, and that's totally fine. Like I said, my first home daycare, I did Baby Connect, which I don't even know if that's around now. It was very similar to these programs. If you're not doing some kind of an app program and you're doing papers, this is the section that you would talk about your signing in and out policy. Page talks about photos. Are you taking photos of the children? Make sure, if so, make sure you get written consent from the parents that they approve of that. I do let them know that I try to get those first time events that occur here. So if they have a baby enrolling in the program, then I am going to do my best to capture those moments for them, whether they're crawling or walking, sitting up. I do let the parents know that I do use photos for social media, for like our Facebook or Instagram. You know, if they are not comfortable with that, I do not post, you know, the child's photo. I have several kids in the past that I've not been able to do that with at the center, and that's not a problem. They would simply just decline the photo release statement. Next up is water play. So during the summer months, we do engage in daily or weekly water play. I talk about sunscreen here, whether or not you are going to supply it or the family's going to supply it. And here you would talk about needing to have, you know, a swimsuit with them, a towel, if you're not going to provide that. I do let them know like different examples of water play that we would be doing, like wading pools, no more than 12 to 18 inches of water. We use sprinklers, slip and slides, water tables. I do have an inflatable water slide, just to kind of give them a rundown of what kind of water that we're going to do. And the last thing I have is a final note. I want to make sure that I stress to the parents that I want you to feel comfortable with my policies and procedures. If they don't understand something, or they have any concerns or feel uncomfortable with one or more of my policies, that they express that to me before enrolling in my childcare program, because these policies and procedures are what I believe in. So if we are not on the same page, obviously this is not the program for them. I also encourage an open door policy. I encourage them to talk about anything with me if they have, you know, an issue with anything at any time that is convenient for both of us. I do not allow parents to have, you know, serious conversations upon drop off or pickup, because that's just not the time. The children are, you know, there's too many children usually going on. And that's, you know, you need to schedule a time to actually sit down and talk so that it's not interrupted. I thank them for the opportunity to work with them and their children. I talk about how I look forward to a future of keeping your child smiley and safe. And then right here, I simply just put a note: by signing a parent-provider contract enrollment application, it is understood that all policies and procedures of, and you put your business name, handbook are understood and agreed upon. At the very end of the book, I have a handbook acceptance provider's copy and a handbook acceptance parents copy. They sign both of them, you sign both of them, you give them one, and you keep one in the child's file. So that is it, guys. That is an overview on how I created my parent handbook. I know this video is long, but I definitely think there's a lot of good information in here, especially if you've never written a handbook before. I hope this gives you a good outline to start with. Hope you found, you know, good knowledge in the summary of each section that I went through. If you have any questions, please comment down below. I'll happily address, you know, any questions that you have in regards to any section of this. I definitely recommend, like I said at the beginning of this video, that you go over this handbook with your parents, especially your vacation policy, your tuition policy, your attendance policy, you know, what's going to happen if there's a disaster. Go over your expectations, you know, as far as toileting, you know, talk about the sleep schedule, talk about not bringing toys in, talk about, you know, doing the water play, just things that, you know, you are firm on your beliefs with. And so with that being said, I hope you like this video. Thank you all for watching. If you do like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, please consider doing so, and I'll see you in my next video.